I've seen some brilliant talks so far, and I look forward to seeing some more as the week goes on. So my talk today is about how data journalism can connect citizens to national statistics. As a data journalist at the Office for National Statistics, I spend a lot of time looking at numbers. My left brain is engaged in linear thinking, facts, and logic. I perform calculations and I make comparisons that have straightforward answers. When I tell you these facts, you'll no doubt nod agreeably at the decrease or tell me that the increase is a terrible shame. But I bet when you go home, you won't recall the context of those facts, what they mean for society or for you. The stat will stand alone, get put on a shelf in your brain, waiting for an obscure pub quiz question, or maybe you'll just forget it. However, if you want to know the secret to engaging readers with data, you're going to have to make use of your right brain, the creative side. I'm going to use this talk to tell you about how the power of storytelling can connect citizens to national statistics and data in general, including audiences who would never normally seek out spreadsheets. So I've just made this slide here to explain to you what the audiences are at ONS and who looks at our data. So in the light blue, we have the expert users. So we have the expert analyst, and that might be somebody who creates their own analysis from data. We have the technical user, and that's somebody who may want the data to create their own data sets and customize their own geographical boundaries, for example. And we also have the policy influencer. So that could be somebody who uses data for benchmarking and comparison. And then in the dark blue, we have the non-expert users. So the two categories we have are the information forager. So that could be somebody who wants local data and keeps up to date with the latest economic and population trends. A business person, for example, or somebody that runs a charity looking to inform their work. And on the right-hand side, we have the inquiring citizen. And this is the demographic that we focus on in speaking to in the data journalism team and in our work. So the inquiring citizen, they may be infrequent visitors to our site who search for unbiased facts about topical issues. Just a little bit more information on the inquiring citizens. This is kind of anybody, really. It may be somebody who's seen a story on the news and wants to find out unbiased facts. They may have come to our articles through social media. Maybe a friend has shared a link, or maybe they've read an external newspaper article and they've clicked on a link and found themselves on our website. Just think about why people would be interested in reading our articles. So, for example, it could be an expectant mother who wants to find out the risk of low birth weight in her area, or it could be a person with a vulnerable health condition who wants to know what the current risk factor for COVID-19 is for them. So, neuroscience says that humans are hardwired to connect with stories. As a species, we love tales, fables, novels, and Netflix. Since language has evolved, we have used it to tell stories to one another. Today, we often think of stories in an entertainment context, but in fact, our very survival has depended on our formation of narratives. Unlike other creatures, humans have never possessed particularly large fangs or claws. We don't emit venom, and we can't run particularly fast. In lieu of these superpowers, we've depended on using our brains to help protect one another. So that place is dangerous, or those berries will kill you. That's what we think about as the sort of stories that may have protected us when humanity first existed. Now, once we'd established what wasn't edible, we moved on to gossip. Gossip taught us who we could trust in the group, who not to cross, another survival mechanism. Stories are so inherent to the way our brains work that psychologists have even discovered that babies can understand stories before they speak. A good story will make the brains of its audience release dopamine, increasing their blood pressure and their heart rate. A great story will invoke feelings of empathy in the reader. When a reader can put themselves in the shoes of the character in the story, or if they identify with them personally, it allows them to become more sympathetic to the situation as they feel what the character in the story feels. In 2016, a British radio drama called The Archers featured a domestic violence storyline. So, to tell you a little bit about that, Helen Archer was the victim of her husband Rob's coercive and controlling behaviour. This storyline had such a profound effect on its listeners that it sparked a national debate about domestic abuse, and hundreds and thousands of pounds were raised for domestic abuse charities. It's interesting to hear of stories being used as survival mechanisms in modern times. In the next part of the debate, I'm going to show you how we use data to contribute to a national debate about the violence against women and girls. Unfortunately, over the period of the coronavirus pandemic, there have been a number of very high-profile incidents of gender-based homicide in the United Kingdom. These have led to national uproar, protests, and a great deal of collective trauma. People could not believe that these awful crimes had been committed, and many saw them as part of a wider issue. At the ONS, we had a lot of crime data categorized by sex, and data specifically on violence against women and girls. However, we had never gathered all that data into one place before. Once we started looking at the data we had, we realized there was a picture to be built. This picture was about the known state of affairs regarding violence against women and girls in England and Wales. So we began analysing, we began making charts, and we began planning our story structure. In the end, we used data from the ONS crime survey, police recorded crime data, NHS data, the ONS Opinions and Lifestyle Survey, Ofsted, and charities including Safe Lives and Childline. Working alongside statisticians from the ONS crime team, we ensured that the data shown in the piece was statistically accurate and represented in a way that presented sensitively given the subject matter. And you can see here on the slides, this is what the article looked like. It was called The Lasting Impact of Violence Against Women and Girls. As I was working on the piece, the findings shocked me to the core. I'm just going to give a little warning here that some of these statistics may be a little bit upsetting for some listeners. Okay, so I learned that in England and Wales, 25% of women had been the victim of abuse before the age of 16. I learned that 1.6 million women had experienced domestic abuse in the year ending March 2020. That's 7% of women. I also learnt about the long-term consequences of these crimes. Tragically, 1 in 10 female survivors of rape had attempted suicide. 63% reported mental and emotional problems. Honestly, I cried many times during the creation of this piece. To allow the reader to connect with the stories behind the facts, we partnered with domestic abuse charity Safe Lives to include quotes from survivors within the piece. So you can see here we showed the quotes in large font, and they kind of were featured throughout the article. We also featured a series of charts illustrating the data. We didn't need complicated interactives for this article. The stark figures were impactful enough. So here's an example of one of our charts. This is the chart that shows that 25% of women experienced abuse before the age of 16, and it gives you a bit more detail on what types of abuse were experienced in what percentages. So, although much of this data had been sitting on various parts of our website for quite some time, the storytelling element of the piece brought the topic onto the news and into political debate. So, numerous national newspapers covered stories following the publication of this article, and that included first-person pieces. One I think that stayed with me the most out of the articles that were published in the media was a piece in The Guardian where a disabled writer told her own story. One of our findings was that disabled women were twice as likely to be victims of domestic abuse. Reading through the writer's personal experience was harrowing, yet it showed the importance of the data and the real lives it represents. Yes, so this is the article that I just described here. Now I'm going to go back to my initial question. How can data journalism connect citizens with national statistics? In many ways, we are compelled to engage with national statistics in the same way that early humans relied on information for survival. We might not be discussing berries, but we are discussing our prosperity, our personal safety, and that of others. It's human nature to want to know as much as possible about a situation in order to feel safe and in order to make decisions. Looking at the analytics behind our data journalism pieces, we see huge pickup in these sorts of stories presented in this way. And the lasting impact of violence against women and girls article did very well in particular. Telling the stories of data ensures that national statistics not only reach expert users, but also curious citizens. When we amalgamate the primal human need to obtain accurate knowledge with the hunger for stories, you have a combination which has worked since the beginning of humanity. Thank you very much.